Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 168 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I am your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I am a speaker and author of the book From Letters to Leaders, Creating Impact on Your College Campus and Beyond. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together and also college students together. Fun fact, I absolutely love 80s rock music and have always had that dialed in on my radio from the beginning of time, it seems. You're talking Prince, U2, Van Halen, Bruce Springsteen, Guns N' Roses, Def Leppard, Metallica, and AC/DC are always high on my tunes list. And somehow that love of 80s rock transferred to my daughter, who now plays all of them on her electric guitar. So that makes me really proud as a dad that somehow I gave her great taste in music instead of all the auto-tune that's out there today. So today our guest is Aria. Aria is a recording artist and a two-time terminal cancer survivor. Graduating college with a BFA in music, she released her debut album in 2017 and completed a solo 4-month US tour. After relearning to walk and talk due to a debilitating car wreck, she now works in the cancer and mental health communities as a speaker and as a trauma coach while continuing to heal and empower through her music. Welcome to the show, Aria.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a blast. You know I'm a big fan, and I know your entire story, which is really, really just incredible. I think college students that are listening right now are going to be blown away at your story. So if I can open those doors and then get your music and your story out to a larger group of people, I am more than happy to do it because I just think it's absolutely incredible. And so to explain where you're from, I think it all starts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Talk to us what it was like growing up in Santa Fe.
Absolutely. I had kind of moved around the country and a lot as a kid, and Santa Fe was the place that I lived the longest, and I absolutely love it there. Unfortunately, there's not much going for it music-wise, which is why I ended up leaving, but I loved growing up there, just so rich in culture and nature, and yeah, a really wonderful place to grow.
Yeah, not a big music scene, so I can definitely see that as being a problem.
Good for retirement, good for sunsets, vacationing, but yeah.
Not the music scene. So when you were 18 years old, you were diagnosed with terminal cancer, and they gave you 5 years to live at that time. You did chemo, radiation, and you had 16 surgeries. So talk to our audience about how scary that it was to hear all of that in terms of a diagnosis at 18 years old, and how did you work through all of that?
Absolutely, yeah. It obviously was a lot to hear at 18. I had just moved out to college and 2 months in was diagnosed. And of course, as a lot of the listeners know, moving out to college is scary and you're trying to decide who you are as a human and as an adult really for the first time. So that was a big blow. And I think a lot of the time there's a misconception as far as emotions that go with diagnoses because we see it in movies and kind of in a detached way. And we think, oh, well, someone's diagnosed with cancer, they will become sad that they have cancer. But really there's a whole umbrella of emotions. And I think for me, I numbed out, which was maybe the worst, how that I knew it was really bad for me because I am a very emotionally in touch person. And I just completely numbed out. I didn't feel a lot in the beginning of that diagnosis. I think I was just in shock. And people often ask me about the positivity of it and how to work through a diagnosis like that. And I think for me, if people say, how do you stay so positive? And my answer all the time is I don't. It's very important to allow yourself to feel those feelings, allow yourself to go through that numbness, to grieve, and then to get to the positivity rather than trying to go from A to Z immediately. So that's definitely a huge thing that helped me through that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then after being in remission for 2 months, now the cancer comes back into the temporal lobe of your brain, and now you're given less than a year to live. So what do you do now?
Yeah, so that was an even bigger blow because I had just gone through the excitement of thinking I kind of had my life back. Fortunately, that was not the case, but because I only had a year, I actually decided to stay in school. So I stayed in college the whole time, and I continued to do non-traditional treatments, and everyone has their own thing that works for them. For me, because chemo is very much a poison, and I only had 1 year, the chemotherapy was the thing making me feel bad versus the cancer itself. And if I really did only have that year, I didn't want to live in that way, which really isn't living very much at all when you're going through treatment like that. So yeah, I decided to, mindset wise, I decided to just really adopt the mindset of if cancer is meant to kill me, it will. If it's not meant to kill me, it's meant to teach me a lesson. So what is that lesson? How do I find it? How do I apply it to my life? And then physically, I started working with my alkalinity, my body's pH levels, and I healed my own cancer.
Wow, that is absolutely incredible. And now, you're celebrating that you're cancer free. So 1 year after your cancer free date, now you're road tripping to celebrate this occasion with your best friend. Talk to our audience about what happened on that particular road trip.
So, yes, as you said, it was meant to be a celebratory road trip. I was driving from Los Angeles, where I live, to Wyoming, where my best friend lives, and I crashed on the highway at 80 miles per hour. Went across all of my lanes, the median, and the opposite lanes of the freeway. I was found crushed and not breathing underneath my steering wheel where the pedals are, and I had broken all my ribs taking my gear shift off, and I had to actually get my skull reattached to my spine. I had pieces of bone fragments of the occipital bone. It was in my brainstem, and so my brainstem created like a lot of nerve damage, and I got surgery to reattach, and then because of that nerve damage, had to relearn how to walk and talk again this past year. So I just finished recovery last month, my year of recovery. So
Wow, I'm
yeah.
so glad that you recovered, but that must have been scary as all can be. I mean, I've seen the photos on your social media accounts. I mean, wow, scary.
Scary, yeah, terrifying to, cancer is kind of a more long drawn out thing. You have time to process your emotions, and versus just I'm on a highway and happy and listening to the tunes, and then I'm gonna wake up in a hospital and I can't walk or talk and don't know what's going on.
Oh my
So yeah.
goodness. Wow, wow. Now we should also talk about college. I mean, you mentioned that, and a lot of our
Mhm.
listeners are college students. You got your BFA in musical theater from the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. So why was that the right choice for you in terms of education?
Oh my gosh, it was wonderful, and as we call it, a great school. I think a lot of a lot of degrees nowadays, I know this is taboo to say, but sometimes degrees can be a bit irrelevant in, say, a music career where it's all about experience. But for me, deciding to get the degree wasn't so that I could show a degree to possible employers, but just for the experience. And I learned so much in the connections I made through college. Were really amazing. I also got to study on both coasts. They have campuses in New York and Los Angeles, and that really sold it for me.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Sounds like a perfect experience for what you want to do in your career. And I mean,
Mhm.
living in Music City, I live in Nashville. And so, places like Belmont, for example, they have good music programs. And I think what you're saying kind of matches up to what a lot of the students say that they go to Belmont is because they're really in it to understand the music industry and to really make a living out of it, as opposed to studying something totally unrelated that's not really going to help them get from point A to point B where they want in their music career. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, yeah. So you released your debut album back in 2017, and then you completed this solo
Mhm.
4 month US tour. Talk to our audience about what it's like to be recording albums and then touring the country. That must be an incredible feeling.
Yeah, it's amazing. That is the best. Being on tour is the best experience. It's just full of freedom, and yeah, I loved it so much. I think it's important to remember that you can make your own way and you can do things yourself. And people think very linearly, especially when it comes to music. Like I have to be signed by a label and I have to get X, Y, and Z. And there are a million and one ways to be able to make it into a full-time career for yourself. And I think that was the best part about doing that, is that I had it in my own hands and was doing it myself. So
I love that strategy. And I feel the same way about publishing our book that we came out with about 5 months ago. I mean, you can sit forever and shop it around to all these publishing houses and everything else. Or, there is this avenue where you can self-publish and go straight to Amazon and start cranking out books like nobody's business, at a really cheap price. That's the other thing, is I wanted to make it affordable. I mean, when I got the publishing houses involved, suddenly the cost of the book went, from $10 to like $30 because they needed to make money too. And I'm like, now it's not even affordable for the students. And I wanted to get it in as many student hands as possible. So for me, self-publishing the book just made sense because it brought the cost way down to $10.
Yeah, so smart.
Yeah, you have to make those decisions.
There's a million ways.
Yeah, there's a million ways to do it. So don't ever get, into this thinking that there's only one way to do something. There's actually lots of ways, and you really have to make that evaluation and figure out the pros and cons of each and determine what's best for you. So you got to look into that kind of stuff. Now, your comeback song on Spotify, it's called Tragedy. And, by the way, I know it's early in the morning out in LA right now, but feel free to belt out any tunes you want at any point. Intense. You're now celebrating 2 years of cancer-free. And so are you basically writing this particular song, Tragedy, to tell everybody listening that you can really do anything that you put your mind to?
I think that's definitely part of it. And I love hearing different people's interpretation, because for me, I actually wrote the song a few years ago when I was in a really toxic friend group. And I had to just really dive into my own self-worth and let those people go and reassess where and who I was giving my energy to. And then, of course, I didn't put it out yet, just had written it. And then after my crash, I was like, oh my gosh, this song has so much more meaning now. And as a comeback song, and we cannot waste time on things that do not make us feel good and supported and loved. And we need to be done with everything that is not that. So definitely a comeback song. And it's been a great journey writing that one.
That's amazing. And, I have a similar process that you do in terms of writing programs on college campuses. Sometimes I'll write the program, come up with the slide deck, and have a vision. And sometimes the timing just isn't right. And I just save it. I kind of put it in a folder, and then I come back to it. And sometimes current events or certain trends on college campuses, suddenly I'm like, oh, now it's time to reach out and grab this program. Now the timing is right. And so sometimes it just sits, and you wait for the right time to unveil it. And that's kind of how a lot of the programs have come about. People always ask me like, wow, you have a lot of programs on your website. And I'm like, yeah, it's just an evolution. It's kind of my career. It's all the trends that have happened over, the last, let's call it, 9 or 10 years. And so it's all about timing and what resonates with the audience at that particular moment. And clearly you put that one away in the vault. And then after the crash, you're like, yep, now it's time. It's showtime.
That's the one.
That's the one. I really like that. So what's your advice to college students? What should they be doing when the going gets tough and they feel like they can't go on any further?
Absolutely. I always say, I mean, just a cheesy, very simple phrase, but just keep going. I think a lot of the time especially we're experiencing that kind of emotional pain, whatever kind of trauma you're going through, even starting college, a lot of the time we see pain as this huge insurmountable thing. And we have to, again, are trying to get from point A to point Z. And if we really just put it into little digestible bits and focus on what you can do this next day. If you can't figure out the next day, what can you do in the next hour, in the next minute, these kinds of things. Like learning to walk. I couldn't just stand up and then be running a marathon. I had to learn bit by bit. And I think that if you turn things into little digestible chunks, that can be very, very helpful. And again, like I said, allowing yourself to experience the emotions that you are experiencing to get yourself through to the point of positivity and not trying to push it because it will come exactly when it's meant to. And going through all those things can help you heal to the point of getting through something.
Yeah. I love that. Even if it's like small victories, even if it's just getting out of bed or taking a
Exactly.
shower, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
just start with something small and you just don't know what that's going to turn into. The perfect example for me anyway is that I decided I was going to go back to school as an adult and get my master's degree because it was something that I promised myself many, many moons ago. And I remember getting this project in ethics class. The professor was like, I need you to write a paper and talk to me about ethics and the intersection of ethics and business today. And I'm like, oh my God. And it was like a 10-page paper. And I'm like, I really am not in the mood to do this at all. I kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And like, I'll do it some other time. And I remember just one day I was like, it was crunch time. And at that point I needed to either do this project or say that, the master's degree is not going to be for me because I needed to get it done. And I remember just closing the door and I just started with like, I said to myself, I'm just going to do one sentence. And then I wrote the sentence and I was like, oh my God. And the floodgates just opened up. And it was so healing for me because, I was kind of dealing with that intersection in, a company that I used to work for. And it was troubling for me. And I had a lot of thoughts about it, but it was all up here. It was all in my head. It was conversations that I was having with myself. And it was almost therapy to just get it down on paper. It was very relieving to get it down on paper and off of my chest because I found out that I was carrying this burden with me. And I was walking around all day long and it was still on me and it was heavy. But once I got it down on paper, it felt really good. And it felt relieving to just let it all out and let all those emotions flow. And I remember, I banged it out without even, the pen literally did not come off the paper for like hours. And I wrote the whole thing. And I remember emailing it to my professor at the university because I was so proud of it. I was like, yeah, let's see what he thinks about this.
I love that.
And he literally within like, I don't know, it must have been a half hour, he replies back to me and he says, Mike, he said, because it's a sensitive topic and we're talking about ethics and, corporate behavior, he said, usually I make the promise to all the students that I'm going to rip up their paper as soon as I read it. I'll give you the grade, but then I'm going to destroy it because, there are some things in there that are personal and we don't want that to get out. And he said, this paper that you wrote, he said, this is the best paper I've ever written on the topic of ethics in 30 years. He said, would you mind if I keep it so I can read it from time to time?
Wow, that's how you know. That's how you know that you've written a success.
That's
I
how
love
you know
that.
you just wrote a hit. You're like, when it resonates with somebody who, like that, who's got that much experience, and the fact that he wants to go back and read it on a regular basis, just to maybe kind of remind himself that this is an important discussion and it is a worthy project for students to tackle, was a huge compliment, especially coming from him. And it kind of validated, the fact that I was there, that I belong here.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's a lot of parallels between what you do as a musician, as a writer, to even just public speaking, and some of the higher ed world, and exploring some of these feelings and emotions and getting them down on paper. There's definitely a
Yeah.
commonality there. Although I will never have the voice that you do, I promise you.
We can work on it. Look, you didn't think you could write the paper either. So
I'm going to need a lot of coaching. I can see I'm going to spend a lot of money with you.
see, this is good. It's all in technique.
That's really good. So now you're living out in LA. Talk to us about what's
Mhm.
next for your career. I mean, where do you go from here?
Yeah. Yeah, it came to a bit of a screeching halt post crash and COVID world, of course, and that happened at the same time for me. So having to relearn how to speak also meant having to relearn how to teach myself how to sing. So I'm kind of just dipping my toe back into starting to do public gigs and things like that, and speaking and doing podcasts and things. So I want to continue doing that. I'm going to continue to put out singles pretty much every month. I have another one coming out at the end of next month, and I'll continue to do that. And as things open as I can, continue to perform and, yeah, hopefully jump back on tour again. But just building my audience as much as possible is what I want to do right now, especially reaching people with trauma. And I think, sharing our stories can be very helpful. So I'm just trying to reach as many people as I can, help as many people as I can right now.
Yeah, you're doing a pretty good job reaching the people. I mean, you have a pretty large social media following. I mean, what's the secret to your success on
Thank
social
you.
media? Like, why are so many people gravitating to you and your message?
I think, I started out being fairly just professional. It was just music and that was it.
Hmm.
And I actually had a suggestion from my manager at the time who was like, you want to also get people invested in who you are as a person, because there's so many artists out there, there's so much good music out there. Why are they listening? And you have to give people the why. Why should they be invested in you? And I think sharing my story has helped with that. And also, I've kind of said screw it to the social media rules, and I use it in a very vulnerable way. And I will post, curated selfies because it helps with marketing. And then right next to that, I'll post something with no makeup talking about depression and talking about relearning how to walk and how difficult that is. And I think seeing something that is actually real in the world that is social media, that is very just a highlight reel, I think people have been able to relate to that, which was not a thing I thought I'd do at first. I was terrified, but definitely worth it, because people have connected so much more so to the real stuff than anything that's curated.
See, you just hit on it. I mean, that is the key to connecting, whether you are a musician or you are a speaker. Either way, you have to be vulnerable with the audience. I mean, that is what hooks
Yeah.
them in. And I think you figured that out on social media. I mean, clearly, with the huge following that you have, I think it's because you opened up and you became vulnerable about some of your struggles and some of the things in your life. Some things went right, and some things obviously went horribly disastrous. But you're getting up to fight the next round, right? I mean, I think it's also a message of resilience,
Yeah.
really.
Thank you. Yeah, that means a lot. And I hope, that definitely makes it all worth it. Sharing your story, I think, is so important. And I never really thought mine was that special because I live it every day. It's the norm for me. But once I began doing that, and I was receiving all of these influx of DMs and people saying, wow, I connect to this, or I've gone through this, makes it really worth it. And also helps me because I know that I'm not alone too. So
Yeah. See, you're going to be successful because you're resilient. And that message, I think, is super important for college students. That ultimately, I'm not necessarily the smartest person in any room. I promise you that. I went to a state school, didn't have necessarily, the highest grades. But what I will say is that I'm resilient and I'm going to get back up, and I might be knocked down. I think all the college students that are listening right now, at some point in life, you will be knocked down. And really the question is, are you going to get back up? And if you get back up, then really anything is possible. And so I think that's really the message that I take from your story and from your music. And to me, it's just very inspirational, and something that I think a lot of college students are really going to resonate with.
thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you think that my story is worth sharing. So thank
It is worth sharing. And, there are so many good stories out there that are worth sharing. And so,
you.
people need to, share that a little bit more often and be a little bit more vulnerable. And if they do that, I think, we're going to have a better society as a whole. And I think we'll come from a culture of care. And I think that kind of changes our society for the better. So I think that's a good thing. And we do love good food here.
Yeah.
So, any discussion that I have, I need to find out about some good food places, because I'm going to end up in LA at some point, this fall, just on the speaking tour. And I need to know, what is your favorite restaurant in LA so I can get really good food. So tell me, where do you go for good food?
Oh man, okay, I've been thinking of this question. It changes so often because there's so many amazing places in LA. But currently, I love this place. It's called the Federal. It's kind of a small bar and of course music venue. So I'm there a lot. It's jazz music and stuff. but they have really amazing like handcrafted cocktails. They do these soft pretzels with like house mustard that they make themselves, and they have Brussels sprouts with goat cheese and balsamic vinegar, and I am obsessed with it. I would just eat, yeah, I want to order one of everything at that place. So, and it's only like 2 blocks from my house, so it's dangerous. It's in like danger territory. But
That's
yeah,
the
very
danger
addicting. You
zone.
should go there. Yeah.
That sounds good.
For sure.
Well, next time I'm out in LA, we'll definitely go for some appetizers and drinks out there, and that way I know you'll get home safely after a night out. So that's a good thing
Yes,
too.
perfect.
That's great. So if our listeners, if
Yeah.
they want to listen to your music, if they want to stay updated on your career and stay in touch with you, where's the best place for them to go?
For sure. I am on all of the interwebs on Music by Aria, and probably my Instagram is the best place. That has all of the links right there to my Spotify and all that good stuff. So yeah, Music by Aria.
That's it. At Music by Aria, spelled Aria. And definitely go and check it out. I love all the social media accounts. I love the TikToks. I love the Instagram. I think it's awesome. I think it's real. And it really lets people into, your story, which I mean is just an absolutely incredible one. So I know I'm going to be seeing you on stages all over the country. So continued success. And what can I say? I mean, if you're a listener right now, please like this video. Please share it with other college students on campus. And be sure to contact Aria if you want her to come out to your campus and have a conversation. And oh, by the way, her voice is absolutely amazing. So go and check out some of those videos too.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course, it's my pleasure. And we'll see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.